Hello, welcome to another hard surface practice session. In this session we're going to be modelling a sci-fi wall panel. I've seen a few of these recently and it kind of gave me the bug to create my own. So I'm just doing some basic modelling. It is quite sped up, but you see I'm not doing anything too complicated. I've just made a wall and I've subdivided it, and I'm just putting out some extrusions and beveling some edges at the moment. Here we can delete these faces and then bridge them back together so that we get a part that sticks out. I've also cut the model in half and I'm using a mirror modifier, so I only have to work on one half of it at a time. I did a fair bit of reference gathering before doing this and made a bit of a list of different things that normally go into a sci-fi wall. Some of these were taken from Alien Fireteam, which is a fantastic game. They've got a really good all of the environment art in that game is fantastic. You'll notice there's a hangar area in the game, and around the doors in particular they've got great use of layering. So you've got cutaways in the wall where you can see pipes behind it. You've got everything looks like there's multiple layers of sort of iron structural work on top of each other. Here I'm studying. I've decided not to do a door because everyone does doors, so I've just done a console in the middle. It's very basic. I'm not doing this to any kind of precision or anything like that. So here I'm going to add some pipes. I'm going to boolean these into the wall in a second. Again, if you are using the mirror modifier and you're extruding anything in the middle, you will need to constantly delete those center faces, otherwise they won't merge properly. Here, just subdividing those pipes, and then we're going to scale in on the X and Y axis just to make that look like a sort of corrugated tube. Next, we're just going to bevel the bit around the tube so that it catches the light a little bit differently. With Shade Auto Smooth on, I am adding in some hard edges. I'm just go into Edge Mode, select the edges and mark sharp. Just fixes up the shading without having to adjust the Auto Smooth. I've slowed it down a little bit for this section. I'm making a detail that you will see all the time in any kind of sci-fi and hard surface modelling, and that is the sort of triangle pattern that repeats. You'll have one up one way and then one the opposite way and so on, and it'll just be an array of those. So I'm just showing you how you make those. If you start with a cylinder and drop it down to 3 sides, you'll get a perfect equilateral triangle. And here I've just put on angle snap. I did add an extra edge loop onto the main body of this, just so I've got somewhere to snap it to that puts it in the right place. Once it's snapped onto that face, I can move it along on the x-axis, and then I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees on its local axis. That's it. So there's just a little bit of a gap between them. Then I'm going to bevel all of the corners. You'll see my bevel tool still got the previous settings applied to it. That looks cool. You could use that, or you could go with the rounded one. I'm going to use the rounded one here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Just going to auto smooth that. You see there the angle's not quite enough to get around that edge bevel. Just going to chamfer this edge. This is going to be the cutter that goes into the model, into the main frame. Just going to move this out a moment. Next we're going to use an array modifier. Just remember turn angle snap off. We're going to use an array modifier to repeat this pattern. Not being super precise, just going to sort of eyeball this to the right sort of distance. That looks pretty much perfect. I'm just going to array that along. If we go 1 over, we can just delete the end one after applying the modifier. So apply the modifier, select the last one and delete. Then we snap the origin to the centre of this, and then we can just snap it right in the middle there. Then I'm going to use a brush difference boolean, and then on the local Y we can move that in. And we can either have that there or slightly shallower. That's the pattern that you have no doubt seen a million times. It's pretty much a staple of 3D work. That and hazard tape. You'll see hazard tape everywhere as well. So I'm just going to delete the centre faces of those, and then behind it, inside the body of the wall, we're going to have some pipes. I'm doing them all at slightly different locations, adjusting the scale slightly, so you've got some big, some small, and then just trying to cover up the back part of the wall inside. I'm just going to fix up the topology a little bit on that centre line. Up on this top part, I'm just going to do an inset and turn these into some overhead cupboard type things. And I'm only going sort of very basic detail on a lot of this stuff. It's going to boolean some notches into the frame surrounding the computer. Join all those pipes together because they don't need to be separate. Just keeps the scene a bit tidier. These, put them in the top, and then I have one going the opposite direction down the bottom. Kind of want to make this one a sort of oval pill shape, if that makes sense. And then we're just going to bevel those in and plug that one in under there, and then chamfer the outer edge. Okay, these parts, not happy with those, so I'm just going to redo them all together. Just add a gap between them all, and then in front of you can scale them so that they fit nicely within the area that they're going to cut out from. Decided to just go with 3, and if I put those in there, just playing around with them really. Okay, check the phase orientation, check if nothing's been flipped while I've been mirroring and changing things around. Just adding this extruded part. And then this centre part, I'm going to make it some kind of like some sort of control panel or keyboard. Again, not being super accurate or precise with any of it. See if we can make a big round button. Yep, that'll do nicely. You'll see me going into rendered view every now and then. It's just to check the lighting and the shading, in case there's any errors. Just going to union in two parts either side of that original strut that we made. And then we're going to add an extrusion in there just to add a light. Just going to bevel the outer edge. I did have a light at the very top, but I've decided to get rid of that. That was something I'd seen that they always put above doors, but obviously where I decided to not do a door, it didn't seem quite the right place for it. Add some additional buttons. Just make them slightly different, just for a bit of difference there. You'll see me constantly applying the mirror and re-adding it. It's just habit, I think. I prefer to work without any modifiers applied. Here I have added a solidify modifier, and what I'm doing is I'm going to separate the parts of the model that I want to texture separately. The non-time-lapse version of this, the whole thing took about an hour, but a lot of that was just me looking for shapes that I wanted to make and things like that. Adding mirror modifiers to everything, and then we're going to split the view and go into shading. Start with the biggest piece. It's going to be the same setup for most of the shaders on this. So an ambient occlusion, colour ramp, and a mix RGB. And then if you crank the colour ramp along, you get the ambient occlusion, and you can use colour 2 to basically be the base colour. That takes over as the base colour. Oh, and you have to change it to multiply and factor of 1 on the mix RGB. Add in a bevel node, max samples, and then just fine tune the amount of bevel. Change the colour and the roughness if needed. Let's make it slightly darker. Maybe add a bit of blue in there. I think it looks better in blue. And you'll see with each subsequent part, I basically add the same material and then click the number next to the material icon just to make it a separate object, make it a separate material, and then I can adjust it individually. But because the ambient occlusion and the bevel is pretty much the same setup on all of them, it just saves having to do that step over and over again. The bevel thickness will change. Also gives you full control over the colours of various parts. These can all be the same, really. And those parts, I kind of want them to look like a sort of black rubber, maybe, black plastic. The good thing about doing it this way is you could add in a noise map into any of the slots, either the base colour or the roughness, and you can procedurally make the whole thing look really super realistic. Depends how far you want to go with it. I'm just giving it a sort of base pass at the moment. Add an emission node to the screen and the little lights above the struts. Knock down the ambient on the pipes slightly just so you can see them a bit better. Here you see I'm going to false colour, and you can see whether it's under or overexposed, and you can just crank it up a little bit if needed. Next I'm going to set up a camera so we can get a render. And the reason I want to get a render is so that I can use the compositor. Just moving the camera back on its local Z. So if you don't know what I did there, I did, added a camera, got the view that I wanted, press Ctrl-Alt-0, aligns the camera to the view, and then if you press G and Z twice, you'll move the camera on its local Z, so you can kind of zoom out from that exact position. Just add a basic room and some materials to it, make it slightly dark and reflective. Okay, now in the compositor, we've add in a viewer node. You shift right click on the connecting node, you can add an elbow to connect it to the second one. Then we're just going to add in the denoise and a glare, just fiddle around with the glare settings. If you don't have denoise data, when you render, it's in one of the layer sections. There's a setting somewhere for adding the denoise to the data that's included when you take a render. So if you do that, you'll be able to use denoiser in the compositing. Just fiddling with the different types of glare, see what looks good. Add in a curves node so we can crank the contrast a bit. That's looking good. Never used an anti-aliasing node, but I thought we'll give it a try here. Here I'm going to save the render. And then that's the final result. If you found this useful, a subscribe would be welcome. Thank you for watching and take care.